Just let me hear some of that rock and roll music. Any old way you choose it.
Hello, this is Katie with Vintage and Vinyl, and I'll be spinning some rockin' 50s records every week here on my channel, as well as sharing some cool Coca-Cola collectibles and other neat vintage finds. Stay tuned! Hey guys, this is Katie with Vintage and Vinyl, back with another great video for you today. And in this video, I am continuing my read of this 1953 saucy romance novel by Lois Holbert called Katie and Her Camera. And I am so grateful to Missy over at Thrifter Junker Vintage Hunter for starting this incredible saucy book trend. It's been fun reading this story with you, and I have not read ahead, although this week I was really tempted, but I didn't. I'm reading it for you on camera for the first time, so I'm getting the latest as you are. And I also want to thank Nicole over at Nesting Haven for having this book in one of her live sales. This has just been really fun to read, Nicole, so thank you so much. And speaking of live sales and other YouTube live events, there's a lot happening this week. It's kind of a big week for me in the world of YouTube because I will be with you on Saturday live, and it is the first time I am on the calendar, so that's very exciting. And the reason I'm going live is because I'm celebrating 300 subscribers, and I want all my YouTube friends to be in the chat and come have fun with me. It's a big honor to reach 300, and I can't thank you all enough for supporting and subscribing and just being so awesome. So come by, we're gonna have some fun games, lots of great banter in the chat. Nate from New Zealand's gonna be there. And of course, we're going to be giving away some prizes. So I have Fostoria 1950s records and some great advertising tins. So you do not wanna miss this Saturday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on my YouTube page, Vintage and Vinyl, where you are watching me now. So let's talk a little bit about the calendar, because I'm not the only one having some awesome events this week. There are tons of things going on, and Corey the Thrifted Artist is the one who makes the calendar. And man, Corey, without this calendar, I would be just utterly lost. There are so many wonderful new channels popping up and things happening in the community, and I would have such a really hard time keeping track of it all without the calendar. So thank you, Corey, for working so hard on that. I do want to mention a few things going on because you guys are going to love this. This Tuesday, Corey the Thrifted Artist at 6 p.m. and then of course Thrifting Adventures at 8 p.m. are having a special holiday sale night. So they're going to be doing vintage Halloween, vintage Christmas, and vintage Thanksgiving, things that you really don't see that often. Christmas is a little easier to find, but vintage Halloween is just hard for some reason. So this is going to be really cool to go to their sale and see what kind of items they have. Also, there's a lot of other neat things, like on Wednesday we have Misty back with her Wildflower Wednesday, so it's Thrifter Junker Vintage Hunter at 1 p.m. followed by her famous Instagram sale. And then Sandy Otto is a new channel popping up here in the YouTube community. She's got some great content, and this, I believe, will be her second sale. So go check her out at 4:30 p.m. on Wednesday. Nesting Haven will be following her at 7 p.m. on Wednesday. And then the Antique Nomad premiere, which no one wants to miss because we all need our education from Uncle George. That will be at 8, so I'm excited to see what I learned this week from him. He's just amazing. Walking encyclopedia. I mean, he just knows everything. And then if you want some laughs, some good banter, and just a fun time, go check out Thrift You. It will be Sam's Goodies, but I'm pretty sure Sarah's going to sneak some stuff in as well, like normal, but that will be at 9:15, so we're going to all have a big party on Thrift You's channel on Wednesday night. Now Thursday, Patrick will be back, the trusty Huckster Mercantile, at 8 p.m. And backing up a little earlier in today, Michelle at Comfy Cozy Living will be having her marathon sale. I mean, she does like 5-6 hours at a time. It's amazing. She's the Energizer Bunny and is just pulling all kinds of things out that are a total mystery to us, the viewers, but we love buying them because they're so neat. She's just fun. You got to go watch her at 1 p.m. So she's the queen of the YouTube live sales. and she's at 1 p.m. Michelle, Comfy Cozy Living. And then on Friday night, we're back with Jeffrey, Real Nifty Vintage at 8 p.m. You can't beat Jeffrey and Barb. They're a fun team. Lots of great emojis will be in the chat because Jeffrey just launched his new membership. So you can get a Stella emoji, you can get little flamingos, and all kinds of fun things to play around with while we chat and have fun buying some kitschy vintage. And then, of course, Fatbird Finds will be on with their Hangout, Flippin' and Sippin', and the Fatbird 5 will return, so they will have 5 items for sale with a bonus elephant. I believe that's promised this week, so that's always exciting. Lots of games and just fun chatter, so definitely want to be there for that event. And then on Saturday, I'll be on at 5 p.m. But earlier in the day, we have Dee from Thrill the Thrift at 3 p.m. And Norma Jean Plus One is going to be on at 1 p.m. I believe they were Jeannie, that's Jeannie, and I believe it was Vintage Collectibles. And then they changed their name because it was hard to find on YouTube. So go check out Jeannie at 1 p.m. And then California Thrifters on at 1 as well. And then Vintage Vinny will return for a 7 o'clock sale, which is awesome. And we'll end the day in Miss Pamela's Kitchen at 8 p.m. having a good time with her. So tune into all these events and definitely check them out on my Instagram page, vintage_and_vinyl. And I will link that down below so you can follow the calendar and get the latest updates on the YouTube live events. And of course, come join me Saturday for a lot of fun. So let's get into the story. I know that's what you all have been waiting for, and you're probably saying, Katie, quit rambling. I gotta know what's happening. Well, we're getting to that. So I think Diana Caldwell, Katie's acquaintance, is very, very interesting. She's definitely mischievous, and I think she's kind of stealing Katie's man. Katie, I think, had a big spark with Paul Serrell from the Herald. They shared this nice little moment in the dark room, and now it seems like that might be ending because we've got Diana Caldwell kind of swooping in and taking over. So we'll have to see what happens with that in Chapter 5. And Mr. Esperon's been in a little bit of a bad mood because he's writing this book and it's kind of overwhelming. So we'll have to see if Katie's job gets any easier this week. But let's find all that out right now with Chapter 5, titled A Birthday Kiss. So we've definitely got some saucy coming up right now. Chapter 5, Birthday Kiss. For an improvised birthday picnic, it had worked out amazingly well, Katie thought. To begin with, it had been one of those extraordinarily fine October days of warm sunshine and pearly clouds. The more overwhelming because it had been such a rainy, storm-drenched fall. The grass still lay green on the lawns, and the autumn colors arched over the tree-lined streets. It was a sizable picnic, considering the short notice. Stan and Louise, Kenny, who had sacrificed a troop outing for the picnic because it was Katie's birthday, and his friend Yank, and Mike from next door because he was virtually a member of the family and had been so sweet about bringing over some records he knew she wanted. And at the last minute, Esperon. Katie had been on the phone asking about the prints of her first rolly shots when her mother, overhearing, stage whispered, "What about you, Mr. Esperon? Would he like to come too?" She was very curious after having been daily instructed in what Mr. Esperon likes, what Mr. Esperon believes, what Mr. E thinks, and what Mr. E does. Although Katie couldn't quite visualize him on a picnic. I mean, there was really no harm in asking, though. He had been on the verge of refusing, she could tell by his voice, but then had changed his mind and told her he'd come along and bring her enlargements, provided he could supply the steaks. They were exquisite, 2-inch thick sirloins. With the jealousy critical eye of a rival cook, Mr. Esperon had watched Katie's mother season and broil them over the park-supplied barbecue, but he had been the first to bow homage when he tasted them, sliced rare and juicy with a buttery baked potato and fried carrots produced from the Owens picnic apparatus. The chocolate frosted angel food cake afterwards, with 21 candles for Katie, was the standard celebration fare for the Owens household. This was the first Owens picnic since her father had died, and Katie thought it was a good sign that her mother had suggested the idea. The most exciting present, though, was that Esperon had brought her rolly shots and said they were quite good. He liked her approach, and 2 or 3 he thought were quite professional. Most of them were taken in classes, professors chalking in diagrams, rumpling hair, gesturing, or students in a Monday morning daze. The clusters after the class, the questionnaires, the flirts, the cynics, the eager beavers, and the note-takers. Then there were a few shots of friends, some in the student union. After dinner, Mike, leaning with his back against a tree, began strumming the guitar. Just below them came the sound of the Minnehaha Falls, restored this year by the autumn deluge to its former misting, roaring, rainbow-raising glory. Lazily lounging on the blankets Mrs. Owens had foresightedly provided, they began humming and singing rounds and ballads. Katie noticed with great pleasure that even her mother, sitting on the bench with her arm on the picnic table, was joining in. It was a good sign that she was resuming her more normal and gregarious outlook. "Come on, Mrs. Owens, give us one of your songs," teased Mike, as if he followed Katie's thoughts, and Louise and Katie added their entries. Mike struck up a gay little Welsh tune, a family favorite, and first softly and nostalgically, then larking and clear, Mrs. Owens' voice rose with the song. Mike changed the pace with Felucci and Felucia, and Mrs. Owens swung into it with zest. Then, without warning, Mr. Esperon's deep voice suddenly joined into the lyrics. Mike, grinning in the dimming light, went on to a duet, while the 2 voices continued in duet, and then to some Scottish ballads. Katie experienced a prickling down her spine at the unexpected perfection of the duet, sensing the long overdue relief of the music from the presence of sorrow, sensing also that with the rest of them they were all deeply moved and aware that these were significant moments for her mother. Then the wind sprang up in the night, and it was too cold to stay any longer. They drove back to the Owens house, and in the living room went on singing spiritedly, though the peak had passed. They were breaking off for coffee and sandwiches when the phone rang. Katie picked up the receiver. Catherine Owens? It was Paul Serrell. He was just back from a trip to Washington, D.C., and he needed to find Esperon. He had, by any chance, given Katie some sort of hint as to where he might be or what he might be doing tonight. "Why, he's right here," said Katie. "Stanley, Vince, and Louise are here, too. Why don't you come out and join us? Or shall I bring the phone to him instead?" There was a moment's pause, and Serrell said he'd be over in a few minutes, and that he was sorry to barge in like this, but it was urgent. Katie came back to hear Mrs. Owens asking Esperon why with such a voice didn't he sing professionally. He shrugged. His father, in fact, had actually been an opera singer, and he wanted him to sing, but he had different ideas and had wanted to be an artist and later turned into a photographer. "What about you?" Esperon countered. "You have a trained voice." Mrs. Owens laughed. "Well, only in the sense that all the Welsh sing. I mean, except Katie. She's tone deaf, and the music ends with her speaking voice. When I was a little girl in Wales, I couldn't walk the street to the butcher's without hearing an impromptu songfest. And Kenny has a fine voice. I wouldn't be surprised if he became a singer, though he thinks it's a little silly now." Mike, with his memory for all things musical, recalled hearing of Esperon's father and associated him with the Wagnerian opera. They were still talking about music when Paul Serrell rang the doorbell. He apologized again for intruding, and after introductions, he drew Esperon into the next room for a quiet conference. Conversation languished. They could hear Serrell talking rapidly, and they could see him referring once or twice to a little green notebook. But Esperon's face gave no clue to his reactions or the subject. He seemed to make a protest, and then nodded. "We still have a few minutes," he was saying as they returned, "and if this looks like an all-night session, you better have a bite first." Cyril gratefully accepted sandwiches and coffee. "I wish I'd known it was your birthday, Katie," he said. "I would have interrupted anyhow, but at least I could have brought you some flowers as a way of an apology. So you've been using Ralph's Rolly. Let's see your photographs." "Rather good," he observed, rifling through them. He stopped to examine one more closely. This is Diana Caldwell, isn't it? Who's that behind her?" Katie looked over his shoulder. "Oh, I don't know the name. Some fellow who seems to be a bit of a pest. He doesn't look like a student somehow." It was the man she had seen the first day at Diana's table in the cafeteria. Cyril stared at the photograph and handed it back with no further comment. He rose. "Awfully good coffee. Thank you. I'll have to refuse the cake. We have to be off now, and please forgive me for breaking up the party." Katie went to the door with them, and Cyril turned back for a moment. "Don't look so puzzled," he said with a smile. "You'll hear all about the details someday, but just not in the very near future. Meantime, don't let Stan expire of a curiosity. And, look, here's my promise for a present, since I didn't come with one." Matter-of-factly, neither swift nor slow, cupping her face in one hand, he bent down and kissed her on the mouth. "Good night, and wish us luck. You may have helped already." After the door closed behind him, Katie turned and walked back to the living room, her fingers at her lips as if she were still not quite certain what had happened. Only Mike noticed her lapse into languor while everyone else was speculating on the mystery project. "Katie, you look very sleepy," he said, getting up. "You better get to bed. We're all leaving anyhow, and I'll call you tomorrow about that concert." She gave him a sisterly good-night peck on the cheek and said vaguely yes, and that would be fine, and thank you for the lovely records, and then good night to Louise and Stan. Later, when the dishes were done and she went up to underdress, she lay on the bed with her arm tucked under the pillow, wondering, then sleeping and dreaming. So that's it for my reading of Chapter 5, Katie and Her Camera. I'll be back next Monday at 10 a.m. with Chapter 6. But this was a very good chapter. I mean, such sauciness with a big kiss on the lips at the end. Wowza. So we're going to have to find out what happens between Katie and Paul Cyril. And then, of course, who is that person that Katie keeps seeing in the school cafeteria with Diana Caldwell? That's very curious to me. The one that she mentioned was in the background of one of her photographs. And then, of course, there's some very interesting things going on with Paul Cyril and Mr. Esperon. We're going to have to see what that secret project was. There's definitely something there. So I can't wait to give you all the new details next week when we tune in for Chapter 6. And I will see you all this Saturday, 5 p.m. on my big celebration for 300 subscribers. And of course, I'll catch you in between then on the YouTube live chats. So that's it for this week. And stay in, stay safe, and binge YouTube.
That's why I go for that rock and roll music. Any old